Welcome to Talking Supply Chain. In each episode, top supply chain industry professionals and the nation's top thought leaders join host Brian Strait and share their unique insights to help supply chain managers stay one step ahead of their competition. This is Talking Supply Chain. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Talking Supply Chain podcast. I am your host, Brian Strait, and I'm glad you've taken a few minutes to join us for this episode. Supply chain visibility remains a key initiative for many businesses, but visibility requires a partnership with suppliers and other partners throughout the supply chain to make it happen. How do you optimize that visibility with external manufacturers? To answer that question, joining me today is Sam New, a director analyst with Gartner. Hi, Sam, and welcome to Talking Supply Chain.
Hey, Brian, thanks so much for having me. It's truly a pleasure.
I think many people are obviously familiar with Gartner, but people may not be as familiar with you. So, do you want to kick off the conversation by telling us a little bit about you and your background and what you guys do, what you do with Gartner?
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So again, I'm Sam New. I'm an analyst in Gartner's supply chain practice, which is one of the fastest and most significantly growing research practices at Gartner. I've been at Gartner about 10 years, and I sit in a team called Supply Operations. And within Supply Operations, we don't focus on specific industry verticals, but rather process or domain excellence across what is essentially the source, make, and deliver areas in supply chain management. And where I'm positioned is a little interesting because I'm at the intersection of source and make. So I look at all things related to third party, contract, external, or outsourced manufacturing, whatever terminology you wish to use. My career previously is I have an industrial background. I spent a lot of my career in aerospace and defense, working on both government and commercial programs, but a lot of things related to internal and external manufacturing. So that I bring that perspective as well.
Great. So you've done a lot of you got a lot of experience in external manufacturing. Obviously,
Sure.
you've done a
Yep.
lot of research in that area. You've done a lot of research on the visibility in
Right.
external manufacturing operations. So, two-part question here to get us started. Why is visibility so important when using external or contract manufacturers? And two, how does that factor into the broader efforts as companies try to look to optimize their supply chain network?
Yeah. So first, you've got to realize that not only are more organizations relying on external manufacturers in increasing volumes, they're also looking at external manufacturers for what we call adjacent value-added services. So in addition to traditional manufacturing functions, we see a lot of external manufacturing service providers offering additional services, things like sourcing and procurement, logistics, kind of light type services, software solutions, um, you know, things like risk management tools and all kinds of different things, right? So we see external manufacturing service providers kind of evolving from traditional contract manufacturers into more of kind of end-to-end supply chain solutions providers. And as that transition has taken place, what we've seen is we've seen astute brand owners going outside for manufacturing services for more than just traditional manufacturing activities, right? So creative brand owners are thinking more strategically about the myriad benefits that external manufacturing partners can bring to bear. And that those are things like speeding up time to market, expanding product offerings and technical capability, increasing agility or flexibility, and things like that. So recently, we conducted a primary research study and we said, okay, look, to the extent that you're using external manufacturers, why are you doing it? And the things that we noticed are speeding up time to market or time to volume and expanding product offerings into new product categories, geography, and things like that actually outranked reducing overall costs. So historically, external manufacturing was about cost reduction, right? Now, creative and strategic thinking brand owners are considering things like speeding up time to market or time to volume and entering new markets, right? I think 27% and 26% of survey respondents actually identified those as the primary reasons for going outside. So you think about visibility, right? Visibility is increasingly important because brands are relying more on external manufacturers for more and more things. But when the decision is made to outsource manufacturing activities, there's an inherent loss of visibility. We're talking about not using our own production assets, so you can't just visit the facility and look at what's going on. And we don't
Yeah.
typically have employees embedded in those organizations. So there's kind of that loss. And then there's also the problem of traditional contract manufacturers are notoriously opaque when it comes to their operations and things like that. So there's this additional challenge that has to be overcome. So again, external manufacturing is great, a lot of strategic benefits, a lot of potential upside. At the same time, there is a trade-off between accessing those capabilities and holistic visibility.
Yep. So it's two follow-up questions on that. One about the visibility, but the first one I would ask you just simply, what I'm taking away from that is that growing your external operations today is more about growing the opportunity for more revenue as opposed to cost reduction, right? I mean, that's what it sounds like you're kind of saying, right? I mean, it's a way to
Yeah,
build revenue.
revenue generation is a key component. So is increasing things like gross margin, but there are other things too, other factors like increasing network resiliency, building capability for business continuity planning. We think about supply chain network optimization. You hear, a lot now when brand owners talk about lifting and shifting production operations outside of China, repatriating that work to North America or moving to other Asian countries like Vietnam or Cambodia or India or things like that. And all of that requires thinking creatively about external manufacturing. So, yeah, driving business, driving top line revenue growth, increasing gross margin, and things like that, but also thinking about network optimization for a multitude of reasons, in addition to, right, as you said, just reducing overall cost.
Yeah. And then the second question, actually, the second follow-up, I really actually ties me to the next question I want to get to anyway, and that was talking about kind of visibility. And visibility to me is synonymous with technology today, right? You mentioned you can't be in all these facilities, right? So you need the technology. That requires integration. And I think oftentimes companies talk about technology integration, and what they're talking about is getting their own systems to work together, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
and, and
right.
not necessarily, and maybe a couple of key suppliers. So I guess if as we try to expand our visibility through our networks, how far down to on the supply chain do we need to go with these integrations and to get them to work? Where is that? Is there a line somewhere to say, hey, we only need to go to this point in the supply chain, or do we need to go all the way?
Yeah, yeah. So my first response is, first of all, I don't know that technology and visibility are necessarily synonymous, although they're certainly related, right?
Right.
We think of technology as an enabler for visibility, but when you think about multi-tier supply chain visibility, the poorly kept secret is that very, very few organizations have tremendous multi-tier visibility. The quick answer to your question in terms of how deep you go, the answer is you want to go as deep as you possibly can. The
Yeah.
realistic answer is I've seen very, very few organizations get past tier three in the supply base in terms of visibility. And when you think about visibility all the way down to raw materials, that's essentially unheard of.
Yeah. Your survey and your research, and I want to throw a number out at you here and get your reaction to it. Your research found that 53% of respondents identified better technology for supply chain visibility as being a key driver for exceeding expectations and network optimization efforts. Can you talk about that a little bit? Is that surprising to you? Either that it
Yeah,
seems a little low to me.
Yeah, it actually is pretty low. I mean, I would have guesstimated that response at about 75 to 80%. And again, technology and visibility are not synonymous.
Yeah.
Technology is not going to fix broken processes or a busted culture. But at the same time, you can't really enable any kind of true visibility without systems integration. I would have expected that number to be 75 or 80% maybe. And I would question why in that survey, 53% of respondents reported or why we see this 53% number. I mean, it could be lack of organizational maturity, but
Mhm.
at the same time, perhaps survey respondents weren't thinking about this holistically enough.
Yeah. and then I got two questions about technologies I think tie to this as well. And maybe this ties into some of the 53%. I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
as you guys as you talk to companies, as you've done this and the research, what types of technologies we're most commonly talking about here? Let's start with that.
Yeah, yeah. So we asked this question specifically, and survey respondents told us that. I mean, we asked directly, right? To the extent that you are integrating systems with external manufacturers, what are you integrating?
Yeah,
And in order, 57% of respondents told us quality management systems or QMS. 56% said manufacturing execution systems or MES. ERP came in at third, kind of surprisingly at 55%. But what was a little surprising was two of the lowest ranked systems for integration or least commonly integrated systems were control towers at 23% and multi-enterprise business networks at 33%. And those are kind of the two types of platforms that are most commonly focused on visibility specifically, right?
yeah,
And so you can interpret these numbers different ways. But one of the reasons that I think you see QMS ranked so highly at 57% is because in highly regulated environments, and I'm thinking, FDA, EMA, or USDOD regulated, having integrated QMS can sometimes actually be a requirement from a regulator.
yeah. You mentioned control towers. As you said that, I'm thinking, geez, you're right because 5 years ago, I remember talking to people getting releases from companies all the time, and everybody was talking about control towers. And I
Right.
rarely see a release anymore from a company, press releases from technology providers that ever mention control towers anymore.
Yeah, and a lot of that capability has been integrated into what we look at as kind of a market that Gartner calls multi-enterprise business networks. I think we used to call it multi-enterprise supply chain collaboration network. We've changed the name of what that's called a
Yeah,
lot of times, but a lot of that legacy control tower business and control tower capabilities have been sort of incorporated into those multi-enterprise visibility
yeah.
solutions.
So the stuff's still there. The ability
the
is still
stuff
there.
the stuff is still there. It's just been kind of repackaged, remarketed, and
Yeah,
reshaped to meet current kind of branding standards.
yeah. And then the second part of the technology component to me, we talked about some of the technologies you're doing. In your research and your experiences working with companies, are there certain technologies that you look at that are really must-haves if you want to achieve that better collaboration among your suppliers?
Yeah, it depends on the industry set. It depends on the industries we're talking about, the product set, and any kind of specific governmental regulations that an organization is subject to. And again, if we're thinking about pharmaceuticals, and if we're thinking about a CMO that is manufacturing an active pharmaceutical ingredient for a large pharma brand, you're going to need to see that QMS integration. I mean, the FDA is basically mandating that. You're also going to see some integration of laboratory information management systems, regulatory systems, and things like that. To the extent that there's a significant supplier quality component involved in an external manufacturing environment, that's when you're going to start to see things like ERP integration and some different things like that. But when we've looked at this a lot of times, that what Gartner has encouraged clients to consider doing is to approach this broadly and deeply, right? So looking at a broad solution for visibility across the category of external manufacturers and deeper kind of point solutions to solve specific problems. For example, manufacturing execution systems or product lifecycle management, PLM and
Yeah,
different things like that. So again,
yeah,
thinking strategically and considering the broad approach and also the point solutions that can solve specific challenges.
yeah. And then anytime you guys do research like this, I mean, one of the goals, right, is to identify the benefits that you could for adopting the technologies, adopting strategies, et cetera. This research you did, you identified 10 key benefits that range from things like operation efficiency to better cost control and decision making. And I'm not going to give away all 10 listeners. If you want to
Right.
do it, you can go to Gartner's website, you can download get the access to the research, and you can read about this stuff yourself. But my question for you is, that while all benefits, I think, are generally considered good, right? There are always some that drive more value or maybe quicker return on the investment. So, what do you identify as the things that are going to create that quickest return or create the most value quickly for an organization? It's looking to recoup the investment quickly, obviously, and then get benefits immediately.
Yeah, there are a few things that kind of come to mind. I mean, one is improving production yields, right? And improving quality standards, eliminating the risk from industry audits, eliminating the threat of product recalls and things like that. So improving yields is a big one.
Yeah.
Another one is schedule reliability and schedule adherence. It's easier to determine when there is risk to a production schedule when visibility is enhanced. So that's another thing. Also, speeding up time to market or time to volume, can be a benefit of technology integration and enhanced visibility. But one of the things contemporaneously that's been huge is responding to extreme demand volatility and some of the changes that we're seeing in consumer profiles and hence demand, and also response to exogenous shocks in geopolitics or the macroeconomy. And what I mean by that is, as those types of things impact supply and demand forecasting, enhanced visibility helps mitigate some of the impact from that and also get products to the end customer faster that are higher quality and better meet the expectations of what is increasingly a demanding customer profile.
Yeah. So, want to shift just a little bit and get into some of the integration related questions. Obviously, as companies integrate with other organizations, that adds risk, right? I mean, and that's a whole separate discussion, right? As you get
Right.
into
So
and connect that. So I guess kind of a broad, just kind of the overview kind of question on this is, as companies consider more technological integration with more of their partners, what are some of the key questions they want to look at first before they get into this endeavor?
yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things that you've got to consider is cybersecurity risk. And unfortunately, there are a lot of nefarious actors in the world
Yeah,
that would love nothing more than to take a global, especially Western brand offline, or to
yeah,
steal customer data or do things like that. And so cybersecurity is key. And when you're using an external manufacturer and integrating technology, you have to ensure that their cybersecurity policies are at least as robust and as rich as what you have internally. You don't want to compromise your own cybersecurity protocols and standards simply because you're using a third party for production. And what we typically recommend is involving your own IT folks or even considering a third party cybersecurity expert to kind of take a look at that. So cybersecurity is a big one.
mhm,
Another thing that you want to think about is compliance with international laws, and that can be things like GDPR, it can be
mhm,
FedRAMP, it can be international traffic in arms, different things like that, FARs, DFARs, and all that kind of stuff. Because what you don't want to do is outsource production activities, lose visibility, and inadvertently fall afoul of domestic or international laws, right? So you got to think about that. So there's cybersecurity, there's compliance. I mean, another issue can be incurring cost as a result of integrating technology with third parties. We talked a little bit about external manufacturing service providers being notoriously opaque. And a lot of times, if you desire visibility through technology integration, what your manufacturing partner will tell you is, okay, if you want that, you got to pay for it because that's increased scope, right? The statement of work is expanding, and
yeah,
so you have to think about the cost implications of that. And then finally, we're thinking about compatibility. We need complementary enterprise architectures on both sides of the equation. And you've got to ensure that APIs and connection points and things like that are in place. I said three things. I guess I would add a fourth, and this gets back to my point around technology integration isn't going to fix broken process or a busted culture, and that's something that I say all the time. And one of the things that you have to do is, in tandem with integrating technology, you have to think about ensuring that process meets expectations and that the culture you have in place and the culture at your external manufacturing partner that those are going to support the adoption and usage of these technologies.
Yep. And that is that last point I think is I've seen it so often from companies that implement technology and then the CEO say, well, why isn't it doing what it's supposed to?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, the decision from management a lot of times is, we have these issues, so we're going to throw cash at it. And
Yeah.
if we stroke a $2 million check to SAP, all of our problems are going to go away. And in some cases, that $2 million is just an investment in more pain.
I had a one CEO who told me earlier this year, he said, it's easy to integrate technology. It's tougher to use it. So,
True,
um,
true.
so I do want, as we talk about technology and you connect to more systems, more partners, et cetera, that increases the complexity of your networks in general, right? So what, two-part question here for you. Again, I like two-part questions sometimes.
Right,
So,
right, sure.
what system integration challenges do you see as the most common that companies face, and then how do we overcome those?
Yeah, and we this kind of gets into what we just talked about a little bit. I mean, a big one is system compatibility and interoperability. One, you
Yeah.
got to make sure the systems talk to each other, and that they're connected through stable, ideally pre-built APIs, but in a lot of cases, custom APIs. But you've got to test those and ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, and that's hard. A second thing is integrating legacy data, and this can often be very problematic, right? And again, it gets into this in quotation marks solution of we've got a problem, we're going to throw a lot of cash at it by purchasing a system. Well, what about all this legacy data that may need to be migrated into those systems? Has that been scrubbed? Are you mindful of master data management policies? How is that going to work? Because what you don't want is this beautiful new system where the underlying data is junk, right? We don't want to be in this position where we purchased a Ferrari and dropped an 85 Ford Pinto engine into the Ferrari, right? So that's another thing, right? We don't want to go there. And then there's also, like we talked about, change management and user adoption, and that's a two-way street. You've got to have change management and user adoption on the brand owner side, obviously, but that also has to work on the side of the external manufacturer. And just because something was incorporated into a service level agreement or statement of work, that doesn't mean that compliance is going to be 100%. And it's something that you have to monitor. And again, that comes through building better, stronger relationships with your external partners.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the gym membership that I've been paying for, and yet I haven't lost any weight. I don't understand. I don't understand why. Um,
Yeah, it's like every New Year's Eve, right?
yeah,
People tell you that their New Year's resolution is to join a gym,
right.
right?
And
Yeah.
a lot of people do that, and they succeed in that
Yeah.
resolution, right? It's
Jan-
it.
January January 1st, damn right, Boston
Yeah,
Sports Club will take your money. All right.
yeah, yeah. You don't if you apparently if you don't use it though, that's what my doctor said. If you don't use it, it's not going to help you. So
Yeah, it's
just
you got to use I didn't say I wanted to work out. I just said I wanted to join a
join.
gym. Yeah,
Yeah.
right?
So it's great to throw money and integrate and bring in technology, but you got to use it. So
Right. Yeah, you got
yeah,
to use it and you've got to use it in a meaningful
right.
way, with
Yeah.
good, underlying base data. And without that, it's the systems don't do much for you and probably do more harm than good.
Yeah. I want to get in one final question to you. It is a question I like to ask a lot of people because I think it's something that's really important that so many companies overlook. And in this case, we're talking about integration through your supply chain, your network. You're talking about partnerships. Good partnerships start with one thing to me, and that's communication, right?
Yeah.
Um, you know, so what when a company goes to their suppliers and says, "Hey, I want to do this, I want to install this, I want to do that," whatever the goal here is, um, what kind of advice do you give to those companies to get that process started from a communication standpoint, so that there is an agreement and a willingness to work together towards a common goal here?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that, Brian. I think you're absolutely right. And communication is critical, and communication builds trust, right?
Yep.
And I think, particularly for an organization that has a very substantial base or category of contract manufacturers, communication can be a challenge, not because people don't want to do the right thing, but because there are just too many suppliers to really dig in deeply. And that's where it becomes important to think about performing some kind of segmentation exercise, right? So looking at things like the total volume of spend or the complexity of the builds or what have you that your external manufacturers are providing for you. And what that's going to help you do is develop a robust supplier relationship management program for that category that's going to show you demonstrably where you ought to spend those efforts. And speaking of communication, where communication needs to be enhanced and optimized. And that
Mhm.
involves getting out of this customer slash supplier mindset and more into this long-term partnership based on joint value creation. I'm talking about instead of buying things from a contract manufacturer or just giving them a build to print, buying something on a build to print basis based on your own specs, thinking about how are we going to create a portfolio of goods and services that are going to drive profitable business growth on both sides of the equation. It's a mentality change. Yes, it's about communication, but good communication follows from a cultural shift and a change in mindset. And that's what I try to impress upon my clients.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate the time today. There is a lot more in the research. We kind of skimmed over it, if you will. So I'd encourage all of you out there listening, if you want to learn more about this, go to Gartner's website. You can access the full research. But Sam, if people want to learn more, get in touch with you or a Gartner expert on this topic, or maybe another topic. What's the best way for them to go about doing that?
Yeah, one of the best things that you can do is you can go to Gartner.com, and if you're a Gartner client, you can download the research that is included in your Gartner subscription, and likely you have access to speak with Gartner experts about that. If you are not a Gartner client and would like to learn more, you can also visit Gartner.com, and I'm sure that we would be happy to have a Gartner representative speak to you about what a Gartner membership entails and how some of that works. And
And
so
the
we'd
benefits,
encourage you
yeah.
to look into that. Yeah, if you're interested. So
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. I want to thank my guest today, Sam New of Gartner, and I want to thank each of you that took time out of your day to listen to us. We greatly appreciate it. A new episode of Talking Supply Chain comes out each Thursday. You can find it on scmr.com or wherever you get your podcasts. So be sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, this is Brian Straight, and you've been listening to Talking Supply Chain. Talking Supply Chain is produced by Supply Chain Management Review and Peerless Media. You can find it on scmr.com, supplychain247.com, iTunes, Google Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts. For more information on this topic or to sign up for our weekly newsletter, a print or a digital subscription to our publication, visit scmr.com. We hope you will join us for our next episode. For Supply Chain Management Review, I'm Brian Straight, and thank you for listening.